Reintroduced in 2008, the Harley Davidson Fat Bob positioned itself as an urban brawler, an aggressive bike for the more adrenaline-minded bikers. 16 years on, and it is more aggressive and more powerful than ever. But here's the interesting thing. In recent years, Harley Davidson's been desperately trying to reposition itself in order to appeal to the widest possible audience. Think of the Pan America, the Livewire, even the new Sportster. And the Fat Bob is no exception within the cruiser lineup. So why then? Why over in the USA have Harley Davidson decided to discontinue this, arguably the most modern, forward-thinking bike in the cruiser lineup? That is what I'm going to try and answer in today's video. Let's start with the name to try and better understand this bike. Fat Bob, or as one slightly disrespectful viewer called it, the obese Robert. The fat part of the name. To the best of my knowledge, that originally came from the width of the tank, but I'll be completely honest, there's nothing that fat about the tank. My personal opinion is the name the Fat Bob specifically came from the front of the bike. The tyre specifically. That tyre is exactly the same width as the Triumph Rocket. It's so obese that I actually can't fit my D-lock around it, so I've had to get my chain lock out, which I haven't used in about 2 years. So definitely the fat part of the name, that makes perfect sense. The Bob part of the name, that is probably more self-explanatory. Bobber motorcycles. If I get you to come round and have a side look at the bike, bobber bikes are very simple. You need to either severely chop the front mudguard or just remove it altogether. And then at the back of the bike, you have to chop that as well. And you can see here, that is a ferocious chopping of the rear mudguard. Apart from that, you have to remove any excess weight, strip everything off it that isn't absolutely essential. What you're left with after all of that weight saving is an aggressive, lithe, lean machine. Would you like to know how light it is now with all of that weight saving? 308 kilos. Okay, they haven't done a brilliant job with the weight saving, but these are the ingredients of aggression. A 1900cc engine, 308 kilos, everything stripped back as much as you can imagine, and it has 93 horsepower. But don't let that put you off too much. 93 horsepower may not sound like a lot of horsepower to lug around 308 kilos, but trying to explain a Harley Davidson in horsepower terms is like asking what a bodybuilder can run the 100 meters in. It just doesn't make sense. And we all know muscle weighs more than fat. You could call a Honda Goldwing obese or fat. You can't call this fat. This is surprisingly compact and lean. It may weigh a lot, but pure muscle like this, you can still keep it compact. I'm 6'1", and this doesn't feel big or intimidating at all. The size of the tank is surprisingly slim on this bike. My position to the hands is very close. It's got forward controls, which are extremely comfortable. It has a nice ridge on the back there, so if you do really want to open it up, you're not going anywhere. Have a look at the front, because again, it's a bobber, so weight saving is important. There's nothing here on the front end. Everything is completely stripped back. I mean, just look at the profile of the front light. There's nothing there at all. It's got that brilliant Harley Davidson V-twin 1900 engine with that glorious, just everything's exposed. It's so nice. Glorious air filter there on full display. It's got the adjustable rear suspension, which is just so easy to get to. The exhaust, oh, it contours around the engine casing so well. just revealing the Harley Davidson logo there. The quality, the fit and finish on everything is of the highest standards. 2-in-1 exhausts. I mean, this isn't traditional Harley Davidson. This is pure aggression here. And the number plate just comes round the back here, not attached to the rear mudguard. And to save as much weight as possible, there isn't even a separate brake and rear light cluster. They're all integrated into these little indicator lights at the back. Coming up to the top, you've got the aggressive drag bars. Turn it on with this button, and all you have is this. Nothing else. Forget about rider modes, forget about anything. You can see how much range you've got on the tank, and you can do a few other bits and pieces like see what the time is, revs per minute. Apart from that, Harley Davidson don't give you any more than what you actually need, but you do get a whole load of quality. Metal, just beautiful quality, either metal on that or the finest quality plastic that's so hard it's like metal, and that's metal, of course. But yes, you get all of this aggression, you get all of this style, but it's a pleasing mix of form and function. I'll give a couple of examples of these. A couple of ways that Harley Davidson have made sure that this is actually genuinely a rider's bike, a bike you can use. Adjustable suspension, as I've said, which is very, very good. Cruise control here, which works very easily and is incredibly well hidden. And have a look at the angle on my leg for the pillion comfort. That is one of the best leg positions, as voted for by Monica, for a pillion. Even for me at 6'1", that is not an unpleasant bend in my leg. And then for the rider himself, or herself, it's all such a nice, natural feeling place to be, with everything that I need in the correct place. The cruise control, the suspension, it all just feels right, it all works. It's a surprisingly easy bike to get along with. Let's take it out onto the open road and see how it rides. Something strange has been happening to me while having this bike for the past 2 weeks. It never happens to me, honestly, ever, with any bike I've had. I've been dreaming about this bike's engine. Yes, the bike itself. I often dream about bikes. They're on the mind all the time, but it's very rare that I dream about an engine. This engine is so special, so raw and powerful and characterful that I dream about the engine. When I'm not riding the bike, I can't wait to ride it because of how good the engine is. You know, you start it up, it's characterful at 10 miles an hour, you get it onto the motorway, you're going at 30 miles an hour and you just give it some. Third gear, fourth gear, doesn't matter, and you hear that rumble. It's audible, what I do. Something like, ah! Okay, I'll never do that again. I've never done this before. Honestly, it's quite close to being a masterpiece of an engine. It's aggression, it's power, it's addiction. it's phenomenal. It's front and center of this bike. Everything revolves around the engine. Everything else is just a really nice thing to have, and it's all a side act compared to the engine. But don't think that you get all this aggression, all this style, almost ostentatious. Don't think you get all of that. But Harley Davidson have missed out on it being, at its core, a very good bike, because it's excellent. It's got a surprisingly slim profile, so filtering through traffic is extremely easy. The seat height isn't as low as other Harleys because the ground clearance is a bit higher, but still it's easy to maneuver because the weight is situated low down. It may not quite have the continent crushing abilities of other bikes in the Harley lineup, but it's very, very good. You can do 8 hours a day on this and still feel fairly fresh. The handling's excellent, the power is constant and everywhere if you need it, but if you don't need it, it will very, very happily pootle around at 20 miles an hour. The brakes are excellent. It really, genuinely, as all Harleys do now, it handles excellently. I know there are going to be many that don't believe me, but this is an excellent handling bike. But the bottom line is, if I'm going to spend £19,300, I'll say that again, £19,300, I need it to be much, much more than just a bike. I need it to be so good, it's almost life-changing levels of happiness it gives me. It needs to make me feel something other than just taking me from A to B. Even when I'm not on the bike, the pride of knowing that I own this bike, just thinking about it tucked up in my garage, it needs to do something to me all the time. It needs to give me a thrill over and above what a standard bike may do. And I promise you, this delivers comprehensively, more so than I could imagine. And that's what makes the £19,000 price point of one of these, yes, still a lot, but much, much more justifiable when it raises the happiness levels every single day of the week. The ground clearance and also raised seat height compared to some of the other Harleys does mean it's very slightly harder to maneuver than other Harleys, but bearing in mind we're slightly on a downhill here, off-road, 308 kilos. It's very easy to maneuver, although it's not helped by a fairly atrocious turning circle, but it disguises its weight so well. That's a tight 3-point turn, 308 kilos. It's no difficulty at all. It does also have keyless remote, meaning if you don't have your key with you, you won't be able to start it. I actually like this. I haven't shown this yet. That's the fob you need. That is to lock the bike. Just keep it in your pocket, and some people could say it's not needed, and of course it's not, but I like it. It works very well. Competition. This is where the problems start. This is where I start to understand and come to the bottom, or get to the bottom of why the Fat Bob is being discontinued in the USA, let's start with the Triumph rocket. You have to pay £2,500 more for the Triumph rocket than you do for the Fat Bob. That sounds like a lot of money, but you get, for a decent chunk extra money, a colossal amount extra of everything. If it's a one-on-one fight, the rocket against the Fat Bob, it's not even a contest. The rocket would destroy the Fat Bob almost immediately. It's got infinitely more torque, way more horsepower. It's just more muscular in every single element. They're not even on the same planet. On now to the Indian Chief. Now this is very similar everywhere. Just a little bit more of everything. A little bit more price, a little bit more horsepower, a few more cc's. But, now this is important, the Indian still has those vintage style looks. And buyers of these kinds of cruisers, or buyers of cruisers in general, they still lean towards the vintage style bikes. I'm going to move on now to where the problems get even more apparent for the Fat Bob. Over to a bike I had last year and rated very highly, the Harley Davidson Sport Glide. It may be 10 horsepower down on the Fat Bob, but you get panniers, you get a front fairing, and you get a lot more comfort. Look, yes, the Fat Bob may have some slightly sportier suspension, it may have a few other trick bits here and there, but the reality is, for any normal rider, you're not going to notice the potentially improved suspension. You're not really going to even notice the extra 9 horsepower or so. And get ready for the thing that really clinches it with the Sport Glide. For all that you get more, the panniers, the front fairing, and the extra comfort, it's £2,000 less. And that is a really hard sum to try and justify in your head. And I'll do one more thing to wrap this up here. Harley Davidson Street Bob. This is the more classically styled bobber. This is exactly how you would imagine a bobber to look like. It's traditional. It's got less weight than the Fat Bob. It's got more horsepower than the Fat Bob. And get ready for this. It's £2,000 less than the Fat Bob. We're getting now to the real crux of the situation. Why is the Fat Bob struggling to sell? I'm almost there now. I'll give you 2 more little pointers here. I was chatting to Jake, who some of you may remember from Barcelona. He has that beautiful Honda VRX. And he asked me, Freddie, what do you think of the Fat Bob? And I said, it's a phenomenal machine. I love it. And he said, do you think it will age well? And I said, well, Jake, I'm sure it will age okay. Why do you ask? And he said, well, take a look back at the old Fat Bob. And he's right. If we're looking at the bloodline, Harley Davidson bikes that aren't traditionally styled often don't age that well. There are 2 examples here. One of them is the V-Rod from about 15 years ago or so. That is not a bike that's aged well, and because it hasn't aged well aesthetically, it means that the prices haven't kept up with the rest of the Harley range. And have a look at the Fat Bob from 2008. Again, it hasn't aged brilliantly from an aesthetic point of view, and that means prices are lower than other bikes in the Harley Davidson range. I want to wrap this a little bit up with, if it were my money, what would I buy? Rocket or the Fat Bob? For me, it's not even about the money between the 2 of them. It's emphatic. I would pick the Fat Bob over the Rocket. Yes, the Rocket has more of everything, but the Fat Bob is infinitely easier to live with. The Rocket is a freak of nature. It's a bike you have to mentally prepare for to ride, and it's a bike that you have to look 100 meters ahead of you to decide, okay, what's the gradient of this road in case I need to park up? I don't want to get myself in a situation where I could get stuck. None of that with the Fat Bob. The Fat Bob you literally ride as a normal bike. But if I'm deciding between the Harley Davidson Sport Glide and the Fat Bob, then it's equally as emphatic. I'd take the Sport Glide. It has more comfort, more long-range ability. You get the panniers built in with it, and I really don't notice the extra power. So for me, as an all-round bike, plus the fact you get the £2,000 saving, absolutely, it'd be the Sport Glide. Well, it's an excellent bike. I promise you, if you go out and buy this, you will be over the moon. But that doesn't answer the question. Why have Harley Davidson USA discontinued this bike? And now it's crystal clear in my mind. It is a bike that now, here in 2024, unfortunately, it lacks a definitive position in the market. Its place in the world is less clear than ever before. If we look at it compared to the other bikes in the Harley range, there are other Harley Davidsons with more muscle and other cruiser Harley Davidsons with more comfort. Look, if you look at this as a standalone bike by itself, it's a ferociously good bike. It's brilliant, just as it is, with nothing else around it. It's very, very hard to fault. It's incredibly impressive. Put in all of the other bikes around it, all of the other bikes in the Harley Davidson range, all of the other competitors, and that's where the problems start.